Yo, what those up? Welcome back to Reviews with Jake, where I just got done watching The Old Guard on Netflix. The Old Guard is the story about a small group of mercenaries who have the ability, or should I say lack of ability, of dying. They're immortal. This catches the eye of a pharmaceutical company who wants to capture them, run tests on them to make medicine for profit. Corporate America, am I right? So yeah, little late to the party on this one, but honestly, it didn't really grab my attention. It feels like something that should have, but honestly, I don't know. I just can't put my finger on why it didn't. It's based on a graphic novel, which usually delivers some interesting reads. It's a very promising medium, and the writer of the original source material actually wrote this movie, I believe, so you know it's at least going to be a loyal adaptation. It features what could be considered superheroes. I mean, people that can't die, they're immortal, and there's a lot of violence in the movie. It's got Charlize Theron kicking ass the whole movie, which she generally plays really well in those types of roles. All of these things on paper usually get me excited, but I watched the trailer for this and I was like, meh. It didn't look bad, don't get me wrong, but it looked very, I don't know, procrastinatable, if that's a word. I honestly probably would have procrastinated even longer if it didn't become the most viewed Netflix original movie of all time. Now I just feel like I have to watch it and review it. I'm obligated to do so. But don't get it twisted, just because I'm watching this does not mean I'm watching Tiger King. I don't care how popular it was, the shit looks whack and I refuse to watch it. But this concept, okay, I can get behind it, and the pros do start right there. They did a good job of exploring this concept of a soldier who can keep coming back from the dead and the short-term and long-term effects that it can have on a person. The psychology behind it and some of the emotional tolls that it would have on a person who has this ability, as well as just some very interesting and creative, yet very horrible, if you think about it, fates that some of these characters were forced to face as a result of this so-called gift. I kind of want to tiptoe here just because we're nudging towards spoiler territory, but I just think they did a good job of avoiding just the face value stuff and just dove a little bit deeper to make you kind of look at the idea of immortality and not look at it like, oh, I'm never going to die. Awesome. No, there's some pretty terrible things that you could face as a result of that. And I like that this movie kind of played devil's advocate to show that it wouldn't be all sunshine and rainbows. This movie also had some decent action sequences. I mean, it wasn't like that top shelf stuff like an Extraction or John Wick where it's like amazing fight choreography that like needs respect. I mean, this is just fine action. It was definitely produced, there was shaky cam, there was a fair amount of cuts and everything, but it didn't feel overproduced. It didn't feel lazy. I mean, it was very much a middle tier action movie. It was fun. It had some ass kicking, it had some intrigue, it had some heart. I mean, it was fine. However, it was a very inconsistent movie, like through and through. The tone shifts were particularly abrupt at times, shifting from comedy to drama to action and back and forth and back and forth. Don't get me wrong, it's very possible to have these three elements, these three core pillars in the same movie, but I think it's just been done better in other movies than this one handled all three of them. A sort of complementary con of this note was the soundtrack, which I wasn't a fan of. Outside of the true soundtrack, which always aids in the tonal emphasis, so it went through its own roller coaster of highs into abrupt lows, it also had problems with just a lot of music that featured vocals, and I found that very distracting. This style of music that they chose during very key sequences in this movie felt like, I don't know, like top 40 rap songs. Like, it was a very odd choice. Don't get me wrong, I respect it because it was a bold decision, whereas the rest of this movie kind of felt a little bit too straight and forward. Like, this movie didn't push the envelope in any other aspect except for this weird soundtrack decision, and I didn't think that this decision really paid off because I didn't think that this style of music really fit the vibe of the movie. Another con kind of swimming in these similar waters of inconsistent tone was some very unnatural dialogue. To me, part of the act of balancing these three pillars, the comedy, the action, and the drama, is having dialogue that flows freely amongst all three of them. And it does so in a way that feels organic and natural, kind of flows naturally from one to the other. And I didn't think that this movie was very strong in that regard. It almost felt forced, like they had a general blueprint that they were like, we have a plot point here and a joke here. All right, Mr. Writer Extraordinaire, we need to get from here to here in, 2 sentences. It was just like random cue-up lines that were just kind of only there to set up a plot point or a joke or whatever it might be. Like, everything just kind of felt like it was just there just to build to the next thing. Like, none of it really felt authentic. Now, this is purely spontaneous speculation, but I mean, if the same guy that wrote the graphic novel, basically a comic book, also wrote this movie, like a full-fledged script, these are two completely different mediums. So like that might work a little bit more so over here in the graphic novel side and the comic book side where it's kind of panel by panel. Whereas over here, it kind of needs to feel a little bit more organic. Like you need to fill a lot more cracks to kind of make it feel a little bit more fulfilled, I guess. I certainly don't want to question the man's credentials. Like I don't know if he's ever written a full-fledged script before, but I just imagine that's a difficult transition to make from this medium to this medium. I mean, I'm sure not everyone can do that. However, speaking on the adaptation front, I am a little curious on whether or not the graphic novel or the comic book went into more depth and detail over the rules of the sort of resurrection thing that we have going on in this movie, because I have some questions. When you have this concept of people coming back from the dead and ultra healing properties, I feel like the limits and the rules need to be pretty firmly established so that we know, as the audience, when we apply people with these skills in this situation, how the two of them would react. This movie explains a little bit, but a lot of the movie I feel like it's either like up to interpretation, it's maybe left a little vague or gray, or it just straight up just changes from scene to scene. Like there's a moment in this film where they straight up say, yes, we die and come back, but that doesn't mean we don't feel pain. And I'm like, okay, good to know. But then later on in the movie, they're in an action sequence and they take like 10 rounds to the chest, and they're still going around doing spin kicks and kicking ass and like, you know, moving like they haven't gotten shot by a single bullet. Like from my perspective, I feel like it would have been infinitely more interesting and consistent if they had people take a couple bullets to the chest, fall down and die, and even if it's for like 3 seconds, just show them dead and then they pop back up and continue firing. That would have been cool. It would have been like an extra life in a video game. I've never seen that before in a movie, and that would have been interesting, and it also would have felt a little bit more consistent with what they were establishing and saying the rules were in the movie. I felt like these abilities were just way too arbitrary, and it was just really frustrating. All in all, though, I would say that this movie was just fine. I mean, that is literally the best word that I could use to describe it. Like when I compile my list of pros and cons for a movie, I grab things that are either exceptionally good or exceptionally bad from my perspective. But this movie, I don't really have a ton of pros and I don't really have a ton of cons. I mean, everything was just kind of right in the middle. It was just kind of present. This was one of the harder movies for me to develop either list because everything was just so satisfactory and nothing more. It was acceptable. You could do a lot worse, you could do a lot better. I'm going to give The Old Guard a C+. I don't think I've seen a more average movie so far this year. I mean, I get it, yeah, C is technically a more average grade than a C+, and I've given C's out, but those movies at least had noteworthy pros and noteworthy cons, and then it kind of balanced out as a C. This movie, everything was just kind of not noteworthy, so what the hell, how do I treat it? I don't know, I finished watching this movie and I just said, okay, I just watched a movie. I don't know, man, I mean, this movie just stumped me. I'm sorry. I'll admit it. Watch this movie, don't watch this movie, doesn't really matter. We're all gonna die someday. Unless you're in the Old Guard. How do you like that? I knocked your ass down and picked you back up in 5 seconds. That's service, baby. That is why you watch Reviews with Jake. But that's just me. What do you guys think? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to this channel, stay up to date on new reviews coming real soon. Stay safe and thanks for checking in.